Good Tuesday evening to you, Facebook and YouTube. How are you guys doing tonight? It is us, Texans Talking Football. I am SAJ. And you are?
What's up, everybody? What's up, everybody? I'm BD.
So we're coming
Welcome,
to you live.
welcome to another week of great football.
Yes, we're coming to you live from our dungeons that we have because we don't have official sponsors yet. So shout out to all those people that are looking for sponsors. Give us a call. So we are ready for another week of talking some football from a Texans perspective. And this is definitely one that is going to be a very interesting show. There's a lot of crazy things that happened this weekend in the XFL and in the NFL. Let's talk about the XFL first. For anybody that was watching any of the games this weekend, there were two incredible games. And then two not so incredible games. Brian, what was your overall take on the games this weekend? What did you think about the quality of the play, play calling, the presentation, just the XFL in general at this point?
You know, just like every other week, the XFL, it just is such a fun game to watch. You know, I find myself just highly entertained just watching the football. You know, I didn't get to catch a whole lot of the Saturday night game, but I watched all three games on Sunday, and it was just fun to watch. One of the games didn't turn out the way I wanted to, but I still enjoyed watching all of them.
Very true, very true. And I'd have to assume that must have been the Brahmas game against the Roughnecks.
That would be that one. Yeah, that was a rough one for us.
Yes,
Us Brahma fans.
The Sea Dragons. Yeah, let's get to the Sea Dragons Vipers game. That I would have to say probably was the best game of the weekend. For anybody that watched it, that was a slugfest. Super happy about that game in general because it really got a chance to showcase Brett Huntley's skills. Now, for those that maybe recognize that name, Brett Huntley was a backup quarterback for Green Bay and did a pretty good job. But it's kind of hard to expect anybody to get a start or really have a chance when you're kind of playing behind, quarterbacks such as Aaron Rodgers. So this is an opportunity for him to kind of sharpen his skills and maybe step back into the XFL or to the NFL rather in maybe the next season or two. So fingers crossed for him. But that was just an incredible game. Huntley and DiNucci just back and forth, trading punches.
Yep.
And it turned out to be an incredible game. Relatively low-scoring game per quarter, but it wound up Seattle snuck out the win 30-26, and our friend Ben DiNucci, Mr. I got my helmet knocked off in the first game in the AAF. He went 29-37, 377 yards, folks. 377 yards. Those are NFL numbers, right?
Well, yeah, that's why he's the legendary, Cowboys backup, Ben DiNucci.
Sure, we'll go with that. But he went 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Longest play was 65 yards.
Game-winning 65-yard.
Yep, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Morgan Ellison looks to be his favorite receiver. Went 17 catches for 103 yards rather. Longest play was 35. Ben DiNucci, of course. I'm sorry, this is for the rushing. My apologies. Ellison went 17 attempts for 103 yards. Longest run was 35 yards. Next up is Mr. Ben DiNucci. 6 carries, 32 yards. So that lets you know that there were a lot of defensive pressures put on by Vegas. They were rushing a lot of 4- and 5-man rushes, and DiNucci did have to scramble a couple of times. And then, of course, TJ Hammond, he got 2 carries rather for 8 yards. So not much, right? But that's just kind of the way sometimes these things break down. Name that
143 yards total rushing is not shabby at all, though.
no, that Seattle's offensive line knows what they're doing and knows how to protect and create holes, unlike our offensive line.
Yeah.
The one thing I definitely wanted to talk about, though, Mr. Josh Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody recognizes that name, right? He was definitely a threat in the NFL. Just couldn't really. I mean, he had some great years, but just couldn't really seem to keep it together. So it's awesome to see that he's coming out here and he's blown it up with a quarterback like DiNucci. Gordon, 6 receptions, 118 yards, average 19.7. 2 of the 4 touchdowns were carried in by Mr. Josh Gordon. And then everybody else, I mean, you've got Jacor Pearson, who is definitely a formidable receiver on his own right. 7 receptions for 99 yards, and then it just kind of drops down from there, right? There were a lot of plays by the defense, a lot of good stuff that was happening, and definitely enough to kind of take away the win from that game. However, I don't want to take away anything from the Vegas Vipers because, again, they were in that game the entire time. Now, for Vegas, Brett Huntley went 13 to 28, 224, average 8 yards, right? 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Pretty decent quarterback rating. The one thing I don't understand is with those kind of numbers, why would they put Perez back in? Perez went 1 for 2, 9 yards, average 4.5 yards. Why? Why would you put him in if you've got a quarterback with the caliber of Huntley? But I'm not the coach. I can't answer that question. The one thing I did notice is that Vegas did not have a whole lot of rushing offense. If you look at the stats, Huntley did the bulk of the work there, 8 carries, 66 yards. Next closest was Rod Smith, 10 carries for only 41 yards. Not good, not the greatest. So we can see that decent production from the receivers. Obviously, not enough to get it done. In that game, I would say the biggest takeaway is that Seattle and Vegas are not really living up to the stats that they have, right? Vegas is better than the 0-3 record that they're showing. Okay. They've got some dangerous offensive weapons. They've got some pretty decent defense. You just need to tighten some things up, and I think they'll be formidable. Okay. Seattle, we know Seattle's in the mix, right? Seattle is that sleeping dog that always going to bite you, right? So again, for anybody that had the opportunity to watch that game, you got to see an incredible display of football. Okay. So let's move on to the next game, which arguably could be the game of the week. Brian, why don't you talk to us about Battlehawks and Defenders?
That was kind of a slugfest in its own right. It was a close game throughout. And DC just came away. They made the plays when it mattered. I thought that St. Louis might actually pull out another comeback, but they couldn't get it done this time. Their luck ran out on their 4th and 15 try.
It 100% did. So let's talk some stats here. A.J. McCarron, Mr. Cardiac quarterback, Mr. Comeback Player of the Year, did not come back this time. He went 26 42, 262, which is good numbers, right? He threw 4 touchdowns, but he got picked twice. And both of those picks were very, very costly. Okay. Rushing yardage, They only had 56 yards total, which means they did not hand that ball off very much at all and get any kind of production out of it. Okay. And so their defense was pretty solid. Pretty much the bulk of their success came from their receivers. Hakeem Butler went 9 receptions, 105 yards. Darius Shepard, 5 receptions, 51 yards, and then it kind of peters off from there. Let's go to DC. Tamu went 11 to 20, 196. Derek King, 3 for 3, 14. They being Vegas put up 136 yards on the ground. Abram Smith had the most, which is pretty close, right? 16 carries from Smith for 54 yards, and then Armstead went 11 carries for 51 yards, and then Tamu 10 for 22.
Pretty balanced rushing attack right there.
Yeah. Receiving, Lucky Jackson, 4 receptions for 89 yards. That's pretty impressive.
He had a couple nice catches too.
He did. He had some incredible ones. And then Blair went 2 for 62, and then it kind of fades off from there. Again, pretty solid defense. The one thing to take away from that is that Seattle really tried to DC really kind of mixed it up a little bit more and gave more of an all-around look. And so, I guess you could say congratulations to St. Louis for showing up and trying to show out, but they just couldn't get it done this time.
So what'd you think about the chippiness at the end of the game there?
Let's talk about that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about the one big thing that I was very impressed with, which is that 72-yard kickoff return.
Oh, okay? Yes.
Nobody up until this point has had a kickoff return that far. And for anyone that watched that game and saw that play, I'm sure you would agree with me that as you were watching it unfold, you were actually cheering for who was it that ran it back? I just had it and I lost it. Shepard. Here we go. If you watch that game, you're rooting for Shepard because nobody's been able to carry the ball that far yet. I think the longest carry up to that point was like a 30-something yarder, and nobody's been able to break past that line with the way that formation is. I like the fact that the XFL is worried about player safety and not putting these players in perilous situations on these kickoff returns, but it also makes it, pretty slow moving football in a kickoff return. Like, you're just not going to see anybody break free. But Shepard did, and I was praying he was going to take it to the house, and he got hit at the last moment. But man, that guy that came up on him was fast.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So now let's talk about the chippiness of that game. I was very surprised it got out of hand like it did. Now, again, it's football, right? People are passionate about playing. People are passionate about, being in the stands. Like, it is a highly emotionally driven game. No doubt about it, right? But for those players to get that wound up and lose their composure like that really, really surprised me. Now, I'm sure you've probably already seen it, Brian, but for our fans out there, there were about 8 suspensions issued to all the players that were involved. So 4 on St. Louis, 4 on DC's side. Those players are currently suspended. They're allowed to participate in team meetings, team meals, a lot of the team activities, right? But they're not allowed to practice and they're not allowed to play. And I think their suspension was for 2 weeks. And
so it was actually 3 suspensions. Two of them for 2 games and then 1 for 1 game.
Okay.
So, and then there were the 6 other players were fined.
Okay.
And you had a couple coaches that got fined too for each team.
Oh yeah, that's right. I completely forgot all about that. That's
Yeah,
impressive. That's
yeah,
impressive, right? Because to me, what that's telling me is that the NFL, or I'm sorry, the NFL, the XFL is kind of taking a no nonsense policy with player conduct, right?
yeah.
We've seen chippiness in the NFL. We've seen players, do stuff, and some players get away with things, other players don't, and it seems like a very unbalanced scale of justice. I really do like the fact that the XFL is just saying across the board, we're not going to have it. We're not going to put up with it. If you're involved, you're getting punished, plain and simple. So I think that that's pretty incredible.
It
Uh,
is. It is. Now I will say, I I kind of enjoy the you see the passion of the players that kind of evolved into that chippiness. It did get a little out of hand, but you are seeing a bunch of players that they're passionate about this game. And they take it to the extreme. That's kind of what football is all about. Uh, so I don't mind seeing a little chippiness out there. Now, like I said, it got a little out of hand on Sunday, but you know, it's kind of cool to see. It's kind of
yeah,
cool to see players that are that passionate.
yeah, I can definitely understand that. Again, I'm a little bit more of the, on the side of, yeah, let them play, but, there is a player code of conduct and, you're getting paid to play a sport. You kind of handle yourself accordingly.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I mean, I get it, right? We've already talked about it. These are guys that are fighting for a dream and they're fighting for an opportunity to, maybe, elevate their game to the next level or just try and get that one extra step to be the next man on a roster. So I get it, Um, I can't say that I would necessarily do anything any differently, being in that situation. Um, but it just does, kind of harken to, hey, you're a professional, act like one, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was an incredible game and arguably one of the best games that we've seen, hands down. Um, so that one is definitely for the record books. So let's talk about one game that should not have been recorded, right? And that's Guardians at the Renegades. Game. Before I interject my thoughts.
You know, well, I feel like I said this last week about the Vegas game. Like that one was kind of hard to watch too. It
Mhm.
Yeah, that one was kind of hard to watch.
This was a bad game in general. Uh, Arlington going into that game was, if I remember, 1-1. Well, yeah, they would have to have been
Yeah,
1-1, right? We're going to play 2 weeks. Um, but the 2 weeks prior to this game, they looked somewhat formidable, right? They looked like they could definitely, evolve into a contender. And then this game happened. We all know about Orlando's woes. We know that Orlando, you know, as hard as they try, they've just not been able to get the whole team together and firing on all cylinders, right? Um, but it isn't happening, right? Um, Slaughter definitely is a really good quarterback, arguably a good quarterback. But again, this game just did not, to me, show anybody's talent, anybody's ability. Um,
now if
so,
this was Slaughter's first game, correct? I remember hearing that. Like it was his first, his first start. And I guess they had been trying to kind of work him in previously, but weren't able to. Uh, so, you know, 18 to 23 for 124 yards. That's not terrible for your first start.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. I I don't know. I expected a little bit more, and it just they seemed out of sync. They seemed like communication was kind of an issue. I mean, Orlando's defense is good, but they're not that good, right?
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of the things that you saw really were more just kind of mistakes on somebody running the right route or Slaughter not throwing to the right spot. It was just kind of a rough game to watch. But so Lynch wound up with the Guardians going 19 to 31. That's pretty decent. Um, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Really don't understand how they didn't punch it into the end zone more. They had one touchdown, one field goal, and
Yep.
no extra point conversions. That's pretty rough. On the ground, 80 yards total. Not great at all, right?
Paxton had 43 of those, and I mean, he and a couple of those were designed scrambles, but
Mm-hmm.
you know,
But still, for your quarterback to have the bulk of the rushing yards,
you're not getting it done.
yeah, that's not so good. Now, let's talk about Arlington. Kyle Slaughter went 18 to 23, like you said, 124. Not bad. I mean, if that's your debut, that's not too bad. Um, Vaughn's caught the bulk of that, 5 receptions, 39 yards, and then Canella, 5 for 33 yards. And then it filters down from there. On the ground, 64 yards. And it would have been 66 if it wasn't for Slaughter's 4 attempts for -2 yards, right? Devon Smith took the bulk of that ground attack, 18 carries, 49 yards. Now, a lot of that can be attributed to the defense, but I have to believe that some of it falls back on the offensive line. I mean, if you just can't get through, the hole that's not there, you can't get through the hole that's not there.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of yardage that does not get recorded as positive yardage when you're running to the sidelines, right? Can't get positive yardage when you're running sideways. Just not going to happen. So there were a lot of scrambles where they just couldn't catch a break. They couldn't get around the edges. They just could not get that ball down the field. But again, that's going to be up to this point anyways, that was going to be one of the roughest games that I think I've had to sit through. Was not enjoyable. Speaking of unenjoyable
Oh, do we have to?
games, that was a rough game to watch. Okay.
Yep.
And not because people weren't trying, but because things just could not go right for San Antonio. Not taking anything away from Houston, but we've watched their games. We've seen the things that they've done, and they've done some things to impress me, but not to impress me to the point where I would have imagined them to be the only other 3-0 team in the league. So that one wound up being Houston 22, San Antonio 13. This is what's really surprising me, okay? We've talked about this before on Facebook. We've talked about this in group chats around the water cooler. Jack Cohn is an incredible quarterback, and these numbers absolutely do not reflect that in any way, shape, or form. Cohn went 8 of 20, 64 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. There's only 3 possibilities that could have caused that. That's going to be a bad quarterback, bad coaching, or a bad offensive line. And unfortunately, I think two of those things happened.
Yep.
Okay. And we will get to my justification for that statement in just a little bit. But let's go through the rest of the stats. Patrick, by the way, San Antonio only got 98 yards on the ground, which is surprising for that team because they normally have a much more balanced attack. It should have been over 100. Okay. But I will say that at least we are starting to get some more yards on the ground because I know they didn't turn in that many yards last week. But again, that's that suspect offensive line. But so Patrick, 8 carries, 36 yards. Ballage, 10 carries, 35 yards, which is really surprising because he's kind of been the workhorse of the offense on the ground.
I was surprised that Ballage wasn't playing more. Especially considering how he went that first drive. I would have thought they would have featured him a lot more. I was surprised and disappointed they didn't.
Yeah. And I don't know that I disagree with you. I'm thinking that maybe the game plan was to try and draw attention to him to free up some of the receivers. And when that wasn't working, that was already kind of too late to go back to trying to use them, right? And switch game plans midstream. But let's talk about the Roughnecks. Silvers, 24-35, 278 yards, average 7.9, 3 touchdowns, 1. But, hey, at least we know he's not invincible. He can be beat. On the ground, they went 102 yards. In the air, they went 281, right? Borghi was killing it that game.
Oh, my gosh.
15 carries, 74 yards.
And on one leg for more than half of that game.
Yep.
I thought when he went down, I thought he was done. Maybe even for the year. But
apparently not.
One-legged man came back.
Yep. And he did incredible.
Yep.
For receiving, Kirkland, 6 receptions, 77 yards. Harris, 2 receptions for 48 yards, which is insane and unheard of, right? It means your defense is sleeping. And then Allen went 4 receptions for 40 yards, and then it kind of filters down from there.
But look at the longs for all these receivers. Kirkland, long of 29. Harris, 42. 25 from Allen. 27 from Bird. 25 from Smith. 18 from Burnett. They were just going deep on us. All game. They had six deep passes. I know I texted you during the game. Our secondary was just playing way off of them, and they still kept getting burned deep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was really kind of surprised that what little halftime adjustments were made were actually done. I was expecting a lot more from our OCs and our DCs to try and compensate for the killer offense that Houston was putting up. It just wasn't happening, man.
No.
I know Ward himself had said that he was not real happy with the production of the team and that some changes were going to be coming. If anybody is watching on social media and seeing some of the stuff that's going down, there definitely are some changes that are coming, and a lot of teams have made some moves.
What do you think those changes need to be? We see on all the Facebook groups, the biggest thing is right now, we need another quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I
don't think the quarterback is the problem. I stand by Cone. I think his Notre Dame record and everything that he's bringing to the table speaks for itself, and it doesn't really need to be justified. I think the problem with our team right now is the offensive line linemen being undersized, right?
Yep.
I know Ward was trying to go for a ground and pound attack, so he's trying to go for faster, lighter receivers. I'm sorry, faster, lighter offensive linemen to kind of make wedges and holes and let our running backs, pound it through. But that's not working. Okay. Those offensive linemen are getting knocked off of their assignments. They're getting pushed around. They're getting manhandled. And it's just ugly out there.
The stats don't show it because Cohen was only sacked once. But just like, the first week against the Battlehawks, he was damn near running for his life the entire game.
Yep. So Cohen was sacked one time, 0 yards, but that doesn't show the hurry ups. It doesn't show the knockdowns.
Yeah.
It doesn't show all the things. And he got beat up pretty good that game. And if I remember correctly, he was already playing with an injured hip. At least last week, he was definitely playing with an injured hip. When you're getting knocked around like that, it's not going to get better. So what I'm thinking the biggest change that needs to be made is that offensive coordinator. Okay. And here's the reason why I say that. If we go to that first and goal on the 2-yard line, that could have potentially won us that game.
Yep.
4 rushing attempts, the same play.
Not just 4 attempts, because I don't necessarily have a problem with running the ball 4 times from the 1 or the 2-yard line. I have a huge problem. You run 4 times just straight down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
The no fake to the outside, no kick out there, nothing at all like that. Just run straight in the middle 4 times, and you just get stopped every time.
Yep.
I've got a huge problem with that.
Right. Where was the bootleg? Where was the option there?
Yeah.
Tight end should have thrown a block and immediately cut out.
Yep.
Right.
Something.
Touchdown.
Like you don't have to throw the ball in that instance, but you need to do something other than just run it in the center.
Yeah. So that I think was bad play calling. I feel really bad. They showed that clip of Ward kind of second guessing.
Yep.
I don't think that 100% goes back to him, although there is some responsibility on his part also.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
He does need to hold the OC accountable for mistakes that are made, for opportunities that are blown. And so my hope is that sometime this week, maybe hopefully sooner rather than later, we're going to hear an announcement that, the offensive coordinator has been relieved of his duties and we've got somebody else in. Okay. And then maybe start working out some of the offensive line woes. Yeah. And I think Cone will step up and start making a bigger impact on the offense. Now, let's look at what the other options are. Let's see if I can find the roster to see some of the quarterbacks that we have.
We got Stinton and Pass.
Okay. So let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say that Cone just isn't getting it done. Who would you put in and why?
I believe, is Pass injured right now?
I've not heard about any injury, but that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. I want to say that Pass is injured at the moment. It's kind of what I saw when I was looking up some stuff.
Okay. So let's talk about Sinnott then, right? Definitely pull up Pass's stats, but if you look at Sinnott's Sinnott's stats, 66.9% of his passes were completed for 3,528 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 10 picks. And then he rushed for 174 yards and 6 touchdowns. Okay. They're not bad numbers. Okay. Jack Cohn. See if pull up his stats. 550 completions, 66.8. He went 6,400 yards, average yards per attempt, 7.8. So again, I mean, those are comparable stats between the two. So I mean, it would be worth maybe checking it out to see if Cohn is potentially part of the problem. Again, I don't think he is. I think his numbers and his play, especially last game, showed that he's not the problem. When he's given time, he's a great quarterback. Problem is he's probably more pocket quarterback.
And I tend to agree. When he's given the time, when team utilizes play action, which completely disappeared for us this past week again, Cohn showed he can make the passes. Now, is he the deep threat that we would want to see from a quarterback? I don't think we've seen that. The biggest deep threat receiver is Vasher, and I know he got hurt, but I haven't seen and I haven't not seen that Cohn can be a deep threat passer yet. So that's the only thing that I look at that maybe a Senate could do a little better. I'm not ready to say pull Cohn, but that's the only area that I'm kind of itching towards for that.
And I could see that. Again, it's hard to tell whether a quarterback is actually going to be, deep passing threat or not when he's being rushed, he's picking himself up off the ground, things like that. So it really is hard to tell. I myself, if I were in charge of the team, I would focus more on beefing up that offensive line.
Absolutely. Even if you were to make a quarterback change, he's going to do the exact same thing with the line the way it currently is.
Yep. So I would definitely want to see them, put some beefier boys up on the line, even if it's just the front three, right? Give your quarterback some time to be able to scramble, to get set in the pocket. Give your receivers some time to get out there and run. When, as fast as these guys are, if you can only get 10, 15 yards down line and the ball is right in your face, that's telling me your quarterback just does not have enough time, right? But so what do you think about the XFL standings to this point? Do you agree with them?
As far as rankings, like power rankings?
Yeah. Yes.
To be honest with you, I have not seen them updated. So
okay.
Let me look at them and I'll let you know.
So here's what I'm looking at from our friends over at MSN. Orlando Guardians are pulling up the 8th spot at 0-3. I think that's a fair assessment, right? Mm-hmm. So in number 7, we've got the Vegas Vipers at 0-3. They're 0-3. I get that, and a lot of it is based on your win-loss record. I think they're better than their record is. Okay, but again, I get it. You've got to go back to the record, right? At number 6, Arlington, and I don't necessarily disagree about Arlington being in the number 6 spot, but I think it really should be tied with Arlington and Vegas for that number 6 spot. Number 5, we are looking at the Seattle Sea Dragons at 1 and 2. Again, I think they had a couple of unlucky breaks go their way. I think that's still a pretty, that's a solid team. For 1 and 2, I think that's a pretty solid team. Then in number 4 is our San Antonio Brahmas at 1 and 2. I think that that's a fairly fair assessment. Again, there are some serious issues on offense that I really would like to see get addressed. And then I could see us being a top 3 team. Okay. Number 3, St. Louis Battlehawks. I do agree with that assessment. Again, their 2 wins came from last minute wins, but they were last minute. They're still wins, right? So they still count for something. And I honestly think Beck is probably one of the luckiest coaches on earth. Not gonna lie. At number 2, DC Defenders 3-0. And then Houston Roughnecks. I think they've got those 2 backwards. I really think Houston should be at 2 and DC should be at
I think so as well.
Yeah. If you look at the games, the quality of play.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I think last week we were all saying Houston was the number 1 team. I think watching this week's games, how DC played against St. Louis and how Houston played against San Antonio, I agree. I think DC should be number 1.
Yeah. I think DC handled themselves better against a tougher team, and really commanded that game the entire time. In the San Antonio game, Houston had their hands full against us for the first quarter and a half maybe, and then they started kind of breaking free. DC didn't have that problem, right? Again, St. Louis tried to make that last minute charge, and their game plan just didn't work out, right? It finally caught up with them. But DC was in control of that game the entire time. So I really think DC should be at 1, Houston should be at 2. So let's look forward to next week's games. And where are we at? Next week's games. So we're going into week number 4, right?
So Houston gets to start off with the bye week against Orlando.
True. We get to battle it out with a very tough 1 and 2 team. I was hoping that Houston would be our redemption game. It looks like it's going to have to be Seattle, right? But we're going to play Seattle at Seattle.
Our secondary is going to have nice little time on their hands trying to guard Gordon and the rest of the receivers for that team. It's going to be a nice little test for them.
Yep. So then we have Arlington at St. Louis. So St. Louis should be able to handle that one pretty handily, not have a problem with it. The game that I'm looking forward to is going to be that Vegas DC game, right? They're playing in DC, home of the Beer Snake, which I'm so glad they set the Beer Snake free this last week. The Beer Snake was so big, in fact, that it duplicated in several different sections. So, hey, man, you find something that the fans love, you let it go.
Exactly.
Let it do its thing.
One of my favorite moments from the weekend was listening to the commentators for the game. I guess at one point some of the DC fans got unhappy about a call or, were kind of messing around and started, a couple of them found some more lemons, started jumping the field. And the announcer was like, "Hey, you got your Beer Snake. You can't be throwing lemons. Beer Snake is a privilege, not a right."
Yes. 100%. Yeah.
That actually kind of had me rolling. I enjoyed that.
Yes. Yeah, and get it back, and the fans start acting a little surly. take it away,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Just like you would with your kids.
No beer snake for you.
Yep. But again, I think that's going to be an incredible game. Now, I will tell you, for those that are interested, I will be giving you live updates from that Arlington game because I'm actually going to be in St. Louis that weekend. This is also a very big game because this is going to be their home opener. Now, don't fret. Not going to be wearing any St. Louis Battlehawks gear or anything like that. I'm going to show up full San Antonio colors to support my Brahmas. And I'm going to let them know that I'm there to see if they can, in fact, rise to the challenge that we here at Texans Talking Football issued to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Our attendance was 24 and change. Let's see what St. Louis can do. Now
They're expected to have more, but let's see how loud they are.
Let's see how loud they are. Let's see if they actually show up.
Yep.
You know, because it's great that they talk about how many people are going to show up, right? We heard talk that, you know, we were going to have 20. We had 24, right? They're saying that they're going to have over 30. Maybe only 25 show up.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. But I am rooting for St. Louis in that regard because I do want to see them be successful, right? They are kind of the cornerstone of the league from the 2.0 version because they had the biggest fan base. They had the most people showing up to the games. They were the cash cow of the XFL. So I'd like to see that. But I'd also like to see them, with their huge fan base, continue to keep encouraging people to show up for these other fan bases. I don't have the TV numbers in front of me, but I know the San Antonio game had the lowest audience, if you will, and they still had over 500,000 people watching the game, right? So we want to keep continuing to encourage that growth. So everybody that's watching us, definitely tell your friends about the XFL. Make sure you get that information out there, right? That way we can continue to grow this league. Go ahead, Brian.
Have you seen the numbers, the full TV numbers for the weeks? I'm looking at them right now. Week 1, it had 1.3 million viewers. Week 2 was 665,000. I'm sorry, and then week 3 was 571. So I think that's average per game is what that was. That's kind of a steep drop, especially from week 1 to week 2. You know, how do you feel about that? Does that make you nervous at all? Now, granted, they don't take into account, the streaming numbers, which is how I watch the game. I watch everything through ESPN Plus. So my watching isn't counted. I know there's a lot of people that are doing that, but are you worried about any of the viewership numbers?
I'm going to be honest. No, because you had a couple of different things that it was competing against, right? You definitely had,
It beat the combine. It had more viewers than the combine.
It beat the combine.
Anytime you can beat something the NFL puts on, that's kind of impressive.
Yep. You also had, that XFL. I'm sorry, the Guardians Renegades game was not that great. So you had competition with NASCAR that weekend. You also had, I'm trying to see if I can adjust this TV Guide. For those that don't remember, TV Guide used to be a book that showed you everything that was on for the week. And you paid a lot of money to find out that Gunsmoke was still going to be on at 7 p.m. every Tuesday night, right? It's horrible. But they sold a lot of them. I think there were some conflicts on Sunday night that did pull some viewers away. I'm not really worried about the numbers in general because I think that as long as they're averaging 500,000 viewers every Sunday, they're more than covering what they expected to get, right?
And like I said, you're not seeing the ESPN Plus numbers and all the other streaming services, which really so many people are streaming these days who are cutting cable. So, I think that that takes, that there needs to be some way to kind of take that into account, or even, try and count those somehow, because it's just such a big medium for people watching stuff these days.
Right. Now, let's let's talk about this year's numbers versus 2020's numbers, right? Um, Tampa Bay versus Houston, 1.9 million viewers. Seattle versus Dallas, because it was Dallas Renegades at the time, 2 million viewers. St. Louis at the Guardians, New York Guardians, 1.4 million. And then the Wildcats versus DC Defenders, 1 million, right? And LA was not that good. So they did not have that large of a fan base. Now, let's flip it and look at the numbers that we're looking at this week, or I'm sorry, 2023. 500,000, a little over 500,000 each game. So I think we're okay. I think we're okay. I think a lot of it is going to be dependent on uh, the saliency of the league, right? Are they going to be around? Everybody was convinced that they were going to be around in 2020. Pandemic happened, world shut down, so did the XFL. And so I think some people are a little bit gun shy about that. Some people are a little concerned about, the financial backing and everything of the XFL. And there's just, there was some speculation early on about troubles with the XFL that caused a little bit of a panic that was completely unnecessary with the releasing of the media manager, I believe it was, for San Antonio. And so there's little things like that have kind of maybe shaken the viewing audience's confidence. And again, 2020 streaming probably wasn't nearly as big as what it is now, right? The pandemic has really pushed a lot of people into streaming services. So those numbers are unaccounted for. So who knows? We could, in fact, have that many viewers or more if everybody's using a streaming service. We would never know that.
Yeah.
So again, I think, especially with the way the league is set up, with the work that Dwayne and Danny have done behind the scenes, getting ESPN on board and FX and the whole Disney family, Zoa energy drinks, Under Armour for the uniforms and the clothing and all that stuff, and of course his whatever tequila. Not a big fan of tequila, so I don't really care much about that. But all the sponsorships, and not to mention any of the other sponsorships that Dwayne isn't directly involved with, or Danny isn't directly involved with. But I really think that XFL will be just fine, right? These lower numbers are not indicative of the success that the league is going to have. I think you're going to see, especially when we start getting closer to the playoffs and the playoff implications and everything, you're going to start seeing more people buying in. You're going to see more eyes on the product. And those championship game tickets for the championship game here in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome are going to fly at a pretty premium price. Now, I'm hopeful.
Championship game is going to be Brahmas versus Battlehawks, right?
That's what I'm hoping for. I don't see that happening going into week 4, right? Unless our offense steps it up. I'm pretty sure it's going to wind up being Houston and DC. So, but we'll see. We'll see.
That's what it's looking like early, but
yeah, it's only week 4.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked ad nauseum about the XFL, let's talk a little bit about the NFL and some of the craziness that's been going on there. For anybody that's kind of been watching the combine, was a great combine. It just did not get a lot of views this year. And I'm very curious as to what your take on that is, Brian. What do you think the implications are of people just not buying into the combine? Well, that's another thing that the XFL had to compete with as well. I forgot about that. But what do you think that means? Lower viewership for the combine?
I'm not sure. really, the combines only started to be a big thing the last 5 to 10 years. It was always kind of just under the radar, and okay, let's see this stuff. Just in the recent past is when it kind of started to be like a big NFL production. So, uh, you know, and maybe this is still the same. Goes back to what we talked about for the XFL viewership. Maybe people are just streaming it, or they're just kind of just catching highlights, catching clips. Do you need to watch, all these guys run a 40-yard dash, or do you just want to watch clips of the fastest?
Yeah. In my mind, I'm not going to sit and watch the XFL, or I'm not going to watch the NFL Combine all weekend long just to see guys running 40-yard dashes, right?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't watch any of the combine this weekend, and I rarely do I. Um, if I'm bored, I might kind of turn it on for a little bit, but I'll just kind of I'll check the stats at the end,
Yep.
and that's about the extent of my combine watching.
So I caught, clips of it off and on just to kind of see like what this next year's draft class is going to look like and how things are going to break down. And it's pretty much looking like Bryce Young out of Alabama and Robinson out of Texas are probably going to be 1 and 2. Potentially, Wilson out of Texas Tech is in the mix there, just because I mean he was a phenomenal edge rusher. He really put up some pretty serious numbers, and I'm trying to remember. I can't find my notes from that weekend. But there was one player, I want to say he was an edge rusher. He laid down a ridiculous 40 time. I mean, we're talking something that was like, you know, four
The
4-4-1, I think.
the Pittsburgh defensive tackle Cansey.
I think so. I think so. Laid down a ridiculous time for a big man, right? That means that, somebody is going to get some incredible linebacker speed. And if that guy can put a hit on somebody, I mean, he's going to be in your backfield before you even have a chance to blink.
So
So,
Cansey ran a 4.67 40-yard dash, which beat Aaron Donald's time of 4.68.
there you go. So see, and we know how disruptive Donald has been.
281 pounds coming at you at 4.67.
That's a lot of dude. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of dude. Okay. So looking at the 40, John Ross out of Washington laid down a 4.22, right? But he's a wide receiver. So he better be able to run.
Yeah.
Barnes out of Baylor laid down a 4.23. Now that's pretty impressive. Again, most of these guys are, wide receivers, cornerbacks, safeties, guys that are designed for the run, right? But that's still pretty dang impressive.
So you had Bijan Robinson from Texas running a 4.46.
Right here, I think is one of the Barno out of Virginia Tech, 4.36 on a 40. Yep. And he's an edge rusher.
The cornerback, Michigan's cornerback Turner was 4.26.
Yeah, makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Barno's a big boy, 6'5", 246. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't me. If it was, I apologize. But
I think that's my water.
Yeah, there's some potential that's going to be coming out of this year's draft, and it's going to be interesting to see kind of who goes where and what. I'm trying to find some of the mock drafts. just to get an idea. Looking at some of these numbers and stuff, who do you think Dallas is going to take first? What do you think their biggest need is in this year's draft class?
Quarterback. But
Okay.
they're not taking a quarterback.
No.
Biggest need for. I think I think they need a. I think they're getting a little bit going to age a little bit in the offensive line, and there was a bit of uncertainty last year with it. You had guys getting hurt, you had guys moving positions, playing positions they hadn't played in 5-10 years. So I I think they should go for offensive line.
Interesting. So one of the mock drafts that I'm looking at from CBS has Dallas picking Drew Sanders, linebacker out of Arkansas, at pick number 26. How do you feel about that suggestion?
Well, I was that might not be terrible because Leighton Vander Esch is wanting to get paid this year, and Cowboys, they surprised to nobody, they placed the franchise tag on the running back.
Yeah.
So there's talk that Vander Esch might walk this year, might go somewhere else for a better opportunity. So I'm not really familiar with Drew Sanders, but they might be looking to replace Vander Esch. And if they do draft him, then that kind of tells you what they're leaning for that.
Yeah. So here's another one, especially with all the nonsense going on with like Aaron Rodgers and all the different possibilities. Pick 26, Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee, wide receiver for Dallas. Do you think a wide receiver can help some of your woes?
I think Hopkins would help some of our woes, but
Yeah.
Jerry would love to go get himself another wide receiver. Just he can't have too many of them.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You mentioned it, Packers craziness. I don't know if you saw the alert that I saw today, but Jets were given permission to talk to Aaron about a potential trade.
Yep.
So Aaron just might go full Brett Favre route now.
Yep. So I'm glad you brought that up. I want to go on the record right now. Mark it down, set it in stone as I speak it, so shall it be true. Okay? Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre 2.0, will spend 1 year with the Jets, and then he is going to get traded to Frisco. Watch and see. Okay? Brett went to the Jets for a year and proved that he still had the juice. He had what it took, in full doubt that he had the ability to, because he was still putting up, decent numbers and stuff. But they're pretty much figuring he was on the back end of his career. So that move to Minnesota, no one really saw that coming. And I think part of that was a little bit of a jab at the Packers, not going to lie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, I would be pissed also if they did me the way they did Brett Favre, right? Why would they ever need to draft Aaron Rodgers? They had Brett Favre, and he was still quite productive. So why even think about a quarterback? He never indicated that he was going to be retiring in the next 5 years. So why do that? And then plus not having him involved in that decision. Kind of the same thing with Jordan Love. Bringing Jordan Love in without consulting Aaron Rodgers. Now, again, do you need to consult your quarterback to find his replacement? Probably not. I mean, our employers are not going to talk to us about who they're going to replace us with. they're just going to replace us. That's just the way it goes.
I I don't think the issue so much is, well, they drafted another quarterback. I think it was, we are hurting at, I believe at that time it was the wide receiver position, and there
which we
was
still are.
a couple very good receivers that were on the board, and they're like, well, we're going to draft this quarterback. You know, that's what, I think that's what pissed him off, and I think rightfully so.
Well, and just like we passed on TJ Watt. TJ Watt was available, and we passed on him. That would have been a great addition to our defense. And he'd still, I mean, he would be an incredibly productive member if we would have taken him. But we didn't. So we've made some really not good choices in some of the moves that we've made, especially isolating Rodgers from the decision and not receivers, and gotten maximum production out of Rodgers. We just did not do well with that. So I'm thinking, just like I said, Brett Favre 2.0, Jets for a year, finish his career out in San Fran, because that's where he wanted to go in the first place. And that's been one of his biggest motivational factors in his career, was to toast Frisco every time he played them, to show them on what they missed out on. Okay? So if this prediction is true and the Packers do trade old, Hippie T for some picks and stuff, they're going to get first round pick, obviously, for Rodgers. So they would be taking the number 13 spot, and we've got the number 15 spot. So some of the experts are predicting that at 13, we're going to grab Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. He's an edge rusher. Pretty solid kid. And then Michael Mayer at tight end at 15. And then they don't go into second or third round or anything like that. So who knows what we're going to do, right? But it would be interesting to think what the Jets are willing to give up to get Rodgers. I'm pretty sure that they're going to probably have to cough up like a first round and a third round, hopefully a first round and a second round. I don't know that we're going to be able to get that much for him. But man, would that free up some space in our salary cap. So that would be extremely helpful. Now, if we don't get rid of old Hippie T, we're looking at potentially at the 15 spot picking up a wide receiver. Okay. And that's Zay Flowers. Pretty decent back, or a pretty decent receiver. 78 receptions, 1,077 yards in his 2022 career, right? That's pretty impressive, especially out of Boston College. Okay. So there's a potential there that we're either going to go after a wide receiver, which we haven't gone after a wide receiver in 1,000 years in the first round, or that we're going to float, Old Man River down the river and try and make some strong plays off of that. I think for the future of the team, it probably would be better to let Rodgers walk, give like we talked about before, give Love a year, see what he can do, get him some weapons, get him an offensive line that can hold, and let's see what can happen, right? And it's either, this is Love's year, or this was an experiment and it didn't work out, so we send him down the road and we start our hunt for another quarterback, right? But the one thing I found really interesting with these projected drafts is that both authors picked Bryce Young from Alabama to go to Texans at number 2. How much of a difference is that going to make in Texas? or in Houston.
I mean, it's Houston. Probably not much.
Right there.
Yep.
Absolutely none. Okay. I feel that Texans is the team that you could load with every weapon possible and they would still find a way to implode. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's lots of crazy stuff. Um, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the NFL, and this is the best time to be kind of in the middle of this whole XFL NFL mix, right? You've got free agents that are going to be getting signed to contract soon. There's going to be a lot of people moving around. I sure hope that the Packers finally take advantage of the free agent season because they usually never do. And then we wind up overpaying for an underperforming player. And we'll see what happens there. Dallas has some work to do also. So hopefully Uncle Jura does some really good shopping in the free season or the free market, the free agent market is what I was trying to say, and make some picks that are going to make a difference. Because I really think that putting everything on Prescott's shoulders has proven to be unsuccessful, and so it's time to try a different game plan. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we talked about it last week. I think we talked about it the first week. We'll probably talk about it every week until they actually do it. But they always start out saying every year we're gonna make running the priority. We're gonna do this. We're gonna and it the games they do it works good. But eventually it turns into Dax running around overthrowing receivers.
Yep. All
So
right.
don't tell me, just show me.
Yep. Just show me. So, speaking of just showing me, I think it's about time we show ourselves to the door. So, this has been a great. Talked a lot about everything that's going on in the football world. Again, I really think that the game of the week next week is going to be that DC game. Let's check and see if I'm right or wrong. But I will again be coming to you live from St. Louis, and hopefully I have some more frenemies that I've made in St. Louis that I get to mock this next week. And just remember to tune in. Right, you can catch us here live on Facebook, or you can catch us live on YouTube. Just look for Texans Talking Football. So for Texans Talking Football, I am SAJ.
I'm BD.
And
We'll see you guys next week.
We will see you next week, guys. We are out. Have a good one.
Later, guys.